A good friend of mine brought to my attention that my last video discussing veganism from an ethical and logical perspective appears to a non-vegan to be an argument for vegetarianism. This, I feel, is because I didn't spend enough time outlining why vegetarianism doesn't satisfy the premises that I discussed, and for that I apologise. This video will address this, discussing why vegetarianism alone does still violate the principle of avoiding suffering, and thus can be included under the broader definition of carnism. While vegetarianism greatly reduces the number of animals killed, items considered to be vegetarian but not vegan still lead to the exploitation of animals. These include, but are not limited to, dairy, eggs and honey. Unless we can justify doing this to an animal and yet not doing it to a human, it is, just as is the case with meat, a double standard. If you would not exploit a human and cannot justify exploiting an animal, the logically consistent approach is to not exploit the animal. Generalised principles aside, industry supported by ethical vegetarians lead to real-world animal suffering. Industrialised dairy farming involves the forcible impregnation of cows in order to induce lactation. In an industrialised farm setting, the calf is then carried to term, separated from its mother after approximately 1 day so that the milk can be extracted, while beef calves are generally not weaned for 6 to 8 weeks. This leads to distress in the mother. As male dairy calves are useless for the production of dairy, one of two things will happen to them. They'll either be slaughtered shortly or immediately after birth, or they'll be kept alive for 20 to 22 weeks before being slaughtered for veal. So quite often dairy directly supports the production of veal. Industrialised egg farming is no better. It involves the slaughter of male layer chicks, as they are useless for egg laying and do not grow to a size large enough to make them profitable for meat. Often this killing is by gassing, but quite often they are macerated, which essentially means being ground up alive, and quite often they're conscious when this happens. Even animals farmed under non-industrialised conditions, like your smallhold farms, will be led to suffer. An animal that is not profitable will not be farmed and will not be kept alive, as that costs money. They have to be fed. So generally, when they become unprofitable, they're slaughtered. Becoming vegetarian is a commendable first step and should be rightly lauded. However, it is just that, a first step. It greatly reduces the number of animal deaths and the amount of animal suffering, but not to the extent that most people can actually go to in order to do it. Therefore, it is a logically inconsistent position to hold. Veganism removes further causes of suffering and exploitation, while still allowing humans to thrive. Personally, I was vegetarian for a year before becoming vegan, although becoming vegan wasn't actually my original intention, nor was being vegetarian for ethical reasons. For me, that came later. So I do find sympathy with the perspective that vegetarianism is a step along the road, further down which is veganism. In my experience, vegetarians are often in agreement with the ethics of veganism and are treating their lifestyle as a transition to veganism. I have known vegetarians who are struggling to give up a certain type of food, quite often cheese. My best advice for this situation is to gradually expose the vegetarian to alternatives to the food, say vegan cheeses, in order to erode their fear that they'll be giving something up in order to become vegan. It's a good idea generally to dispel the myth that veganism is somehow an ascetic position. It's not. It's a lifestyle choice which does definitely involve adapting, but we eat much the same thing that even carnists do, just ours involves far less suffering. And toward that end, I'll often remind the vegetarian or even the carnist that I eat essentially the same that they do, but vegan. It sounds almost like a tautological thing to say, but I try and make clear the point that I've not given anything up. I still eat, you know, chicken. It's just my chicken is plant-based. I still eat burgers. It's just my burgers are made of seitan. You might need to defend the vegan alternative as being expensive in some cases, but in this case I think it's quite often important to remind the vegetarian that the vegan alternative is generally replacing an expensive carnist product like cheese. Good cheese is never cheap. Some vegetarians simply don't know that their choice is still causing suffering. I was a perfect example of this. I got to 26 years old and had no idea that cows had to be forcibly impregnated to lactate. I had formed this notion based on some, I think, half-truths I was told in school, that cows just lactate and that cows like to be milked because their udders become painful. You see, that's half true, because their udders produce way more milk than they should due to generations of selective breeding. But they do, of course, have to be made pregnant for this to happen. As the vegan, it becomes essentially your role to educate the vegetarian. As always, choose your tactics here. I've seen vegans berate vegetarians for not knowing certain things, and that's not on. Certainly in the case of an ethical vegetarian, remember they've made the choice to stop funding something that's inherently cruel, and what you're about to tell them is that they haven't stopped and that their choice wasn't enough. So you need to be tactful in how you tell them this, because if you're just brutal with them and you demonstrate that, you know, vegans are assholes, well, they're gonna then be like, oh, what's the point? I can't resist this, and besides, that's not a community of people I want to be part of. A trick I use in that case is something that a good friend of mine told me, which is to discuss acts of veganism. Ask them, what did they eat that day or in the last few days? Though maybe they tell you, say they had lentil soup for lunch. Say to them, wow, you had vegan lunch. Wasn't that easy? You didn't even realise you're doing it. Make them aware that perhaps as the vegan you don't realise just how easy it is to be vegan. You just do it, and it's just become a part of your life, and you're not this stereotype which is sat there reading the backs of tins and things like that, you've just adapted and learned, and it's just part of your life. Commend them on what they do. Let them know that, hey, you've been fantastic, you've gone all this way, and encourage them gently to take that last step. Absolutely stands for any vegetarians watching this video. Well done so far. Try and take the next step. You know you can make a big change to your lifestyle because you've done it. All you gotta do is probably just cut out dairy and eggs. Maybe there'll be a few other things too, but you know, the bulk of it is gonna be that. That way you massively reduce your carbon footprint, the amount of suffering you cause, the amount of human suffering you cause as well. And that's fantastic, and you're nearly there. So yeah, thanks for watching. Please remember to like, comment, let me know what you think down below. And as always, make sure you remember to separate light and dark colours before putting them in the wash. Cheers!